In today's video, we're taking a look at the potential huge blockbuster deal between the Oilers and the Bruins. We know the Edmonton Oilers are likely looking for help between the pipes. Could they move one of their superstar players to make the team better and accomplish this to solidify the position? We'll discuss one ESPN analyst's opinion on a blockbuster deal. We're going to discuss a little bit further about the Edmonton Oilers coaching change, why the change was likely inevitable, and discuss some people's thoughts that McDavid appears to be kind of calling the shots. Is he or isn't he, and why or why not? We also have news from the NHL waiver wire, several roster moves, and injury updates as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to take a look at today. First, let's get started with the news from the NHL waiver wire. We have the Vancouver Canucks today have placed centerman Jack Studnicka on waivers for the purpose of being assigned to the American Hockey League. Studnicka, I think, fair to say, looked pretty decent in the preseason. Looked like things were moving in the right direction for him. Jack Studnicka has appeared in 5 games so far this year for the Vancouver Canucks, scoring 1 goal. He has not played since November the 2nd, though. So obviously this is going to likely get him down unless he gets picked up by another team, but it gives him an opportunity to get some reps and get some playing time. Obviously the Vancouver Canucks have had a really good start to the campaign here, picking up a lot of W's, exceeding a lot of people's expectations, and their forward group continued to get deeper as some players kind of were playing, I think it's fair to say, a little bit better than expected, and he had some injuries kind of solve themselves as well. Teddy Blueger just returned, for example, so it's kind of pushed Studnicka out of the lineup. I think before the season started, a lot of people thought he might be able to get more of a regular spot. But at this point, he needs to play. So hopefully getting down to the minors to do that. Of course, he could be picked up by another team. We'll find out at 2 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow if that indeed is the case or not. A few injury updates and the roster moves around the league. The Columbus Blue Jackets, Jack Roslovic, who's been subject to some trade talk after not really living up to expectations, really fair to say, during his entire tenure with the Jackets. Had a hot start when he first got there with Patrick Laine, and then it wasn't long after, by the end of later in the season, he was kind of had a falling out of favor, lost his roles, and went from being a centerman to a winger to losing power play time, dealt with some injuries, been up and down all over the place. It's fair to say he may not have a long future there, which is a shame because it is a hometown team for him. He's from the area, but he's going to be out of action for about 6 weeks with a broken ankle. So certainly that's not going to be, any help to getting his season on track here or to the Blue Jackets. But he'll be out of action for a while. A few other names to watch here. The Minnesota Wild today moved Freddie Gaudreau from IR to LTIR. Of course, the Minnesota Wild are one of 4 teams heading to Sweden this week. The games are all going to be later in the week between Minnesota, Detroit, Toronto, and Ottawa. Gaudreau was moved to LTIR to create a little bit of flexibility for the cap, and they are bringing an extra goaltender on this trip, so Jesper Wallstedt gets the call. Now, when it comes to third goaltenders for this roster, they're allowed to go with the team. They do not count against the salary cap immediately. They will only count against the salary cap if they need to be used. But of course, being way over in Europe, it's not like it's really all that easy to get an extra body if they need a call-up, right? So they're obviously teams are taking a little bit of extra reinforcements with them. Like I know the Senators brought an extra defenseman, an extra goalie. I believe the Maple Leafs as well are also bringing goaltender Martin Jones on the trip. And at least they'll have the third goalie there to practice. And if anything happens to either goaltender, at least they have an extra body there who can jump in. They just have to, paper-wise, maybe make sure it works salary cap-wise, which I think for the most part shouldn't be too complicated for any of these clubs anyway. Speaking of the Senators, they might or may not be without Artem Zub again. Zub, of course, returned in their final home game against the Calgary Flames before traveling to Sweden. But near the end of the game, late in the third period, he had this awkward collision with his own teammate, Vladimir Tarasenko. They just had a little bit of a cross-up and banged into each other. It didn't look all that serious at all. They both kind of look a little bit mildly shaken up initially. Tarasenko, you could tell, looked like I think he might have had part of Zub's helmet, might have made contact with his face. So he was kind of, but after a couple minutes, he shook it off. But Zub, on the other hand, slammed a stick and went down the tunnel. So we knew he had just returned from a concussion after getting a puck up in the ear area. And there was word that he was with the concussion, was having some vertigo type symptoms. And obviously, I don't know if he was frustrated thinking he's going to obviously have symptoms reoccur. I don't know how he felt immediately, of course, but I know they were saying today where he didn't practice, he didn't skate, but there's still another 4 days, I think it is, before they play again. So at the end of the day, he's got time to recover here, but if he's not up to it, they do have Tyler Clevin and Jacob Larson with them. And Larson got the call from Belleville, of course, being a European player, special to him to be able to have a chance to go play in his home country. So clearly that's, and a good advantage that way, but they're a better team with Zub for sure. So they're just listing him right now as day to day and just letting him kind of take a few days here and see how he feels. But at least, there's not a ton of games in the next little bit here because of the Sweden trip. So hopefully he can play, but if he can't, at least he has a better chance to not miss too much time this time around if there's any setbacks or anything from that small collision. It looked innocent, but sometimes it doesn't take much. When it comes to head injuries and concussions, when you're recovering, sometimes it's only the least little thing that can set it off. So hopefully he's okay in the long term and the short term here. The Chicago Blackhawks also confirm Andreas Athanasiou, who's going to be out as a week-to-week is what they're calling it for their lower body injury. So he's going to miss some time as well. Now, on to a couple of items I want to take a look at. One, they both involve the Oilers, but the first one we're going to talk about the coaching change a little bit further. There's been lots of discussion around what went down behind the scenes, what it might have been, the reasons gone into it. A lot of the comments made by Jeff Jackson, Ken Holland, and then, of course, a potential blockbuster that is making its way around the internet and social media because of an influential analyst proposing it. So, of course, with the coaching change, a lot of people are saying, and a lot of reporters are weighing in, saying essentially this coaching change was very likely going to come sooner than later anyways, especially with the team struggling. However, if they would have been off to a better start, maybe they wait a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's really Jeff Jackson right now, the new CEO, former agent of Connor McDavid and some other top stars around the league, who really seems to be calling the shots, which is entirely his right. He is technically the head of hockey operations. Obviously, Ken Holland ranks right below him as president and general manager. It's just a lot of people right at this point, considering Holland's on an expiring contract, expected to retire. Jackson just came onto the organization in the last few months. Maybe people just don't think Holland's really calling the shots here, that this is more of Jeff Jackson's doing, which on a long-term basis does make sense. But a lot of the comments made by both of these guys during their press conference just almost seem to contradict each other. And I did see some more comments kind of clarifying a few things, essentially because Holland was saying he talked to a lot of the leadership and, trying to get a feel for what's going on in the room and just kind of get some opinions. Like that's common for managers to speak to some of their top players or core leaders around the club. Obviously they're not necessarily involved in the decision, but they do get feedback from them and kind of rely on their, input a little bit. A lot of people are starting to think Connor McDavid is calling the shots because if you look at it, it looks like most decisions that are made around that team involve him in one capacity or another. And I can understand why some people would think that. For example, Jeff Jackson, his former agent, becomes CEO. Well, that came out of the blue. A lot of people expected Steve Staios to have a shot at being the next GM, taking over for Ken Holland probably next season. Well, that not only did it not happen, of course, Staios ended up leaving to go to Ottawa because of the connection to Michael Andlauer, but would he have done that had he been promised or given a shot to be the next GM in Edmonton? It's hard to say, right? Why they hired Jeff Jackson, that kind of came out of nowhere. A lot of people didn't necessarily see that coming. So, of course, that's a McDavid connection. One of their main offseason acquisitions was signing Connor Brown. Of course, Connor Brown was his junior line mate. Now they make a coaching change, and who do they bring in? Chris Knoblauch, who was also Connor McDavid's junior coach. Obviously, Knoblauch is familiar with a fair bit of the players. Of course, Warren Fogle also spent time with that same junior team. Of course, Brown and McDavid, so he knows some of the players. Of course, that's always a plus. But of course, based on comments from McDavid and even further updates from Jackson, it just kind of sounds like the team might be annoyed with the idea that people think McDavid's calling the shots. And I honestly don't think he is. Jackson said McDavid is sometimes consulted, but ultimately has no say in the final decisions, and he doesn't want to. He wants to play hockey and focus on the on-ice product, and that's it. And I believe that. I honestly do. I honestly think this is more of a case of the team catering to Connor McDavid to make sure that he's happy, to make sure that he wants to stay, and to make sure that he sees how they view him as being such an integral and important piece of the puzzle here to hopefully win championships. Now, it's also weird. A lot of people think that, not only do they bring in, you have a spiraling team with a fairly experienced core group. This team has obviously had a lot of success, obviously not the ultimate success of winning a cup, but in the last few years, they've been to the playoffs. They've won multiple rounds. They've gone a couple rounds deep on multiple occasions here. This isn't like they haven't even gotten over the hump and into the playoffs or anything like that. This is a group that is underachieved this year hardcore. A lot of things went wrong. I mean, in the last number of years, their scoring and their offense have covered up a lot of flaws. And it suddenly wasn't anymore, and they weren't getting the W's. In my opinion, it's just not quite that simple. I think a lot of the problem of this team revolves around roster construction. I don't think they've made the right choices when it comes to goaltending and some of the decor. Really. And also, the forwards could do a better job on the defensive side of the puck, too. Now, for whatever reason, it's just really weird to see Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl barely score a goal in like 10 games. Like, that is super weird. So hard to say what's going on exactly. There's obviously some things that I'm sure we're not completely aware of. What is McDavid's health status, for example? It's bizarre. But at the same time here, is McDavid calling the shots? No, I really don't think it is. But a lot of people think it's weird that they didn't go with a more experienced coach, considering where things are at with this organization. Instead, they go with a first-time head coach. Now, yes, he's got lots of experience, been in the coaching world for 20-plus years, but he's never been a head coach at the NHL level. So was this more about making McDavid happy, or was this more about making Jeff Jackson happy too? Because like I said, a lot of people said he's had this circled for a while. There was even a reference, an article dating back to about 5 years ago when Jeff Jackson was still a very well-known player agent, commenting about how good of a coach Knobloch was and how many of his players that he represented was helped by him through the junior ranks, becoming more relevant NHL players. Look at McDavid, for example, Fogle. You can look at Connor Brown. There's a lot of these guys, right? DeBrincat's another one. So, it's no coincidence. This guy has been known Knobloch a long time and has been a huge fan of his. So, he gets into a position of power where he can hire a coach and lead a hockey operation department. It's not a shocking piece of news at all that Knobloch would be right at the top of his list to be the next coach when it became available. I don't think a lot of people have seen it happening as quick as it did, but a lot of people think it was probably inevitable that it was going to happen at some point in time. So we'll see. Hopefully he can get this organization back on track. A lot of teams do get a bump from a new coach, and we'll see. They'll do battle with the New York Islanders and get things started under the new era here with the Edmonton Oilers. But certainly lots of goings on behind the scenes on what went down. Paul Coffey being in the mix is a little bit weird too. I know a lot of people commented on the fact that he's never coached at the NHL level. And not only that, usually when head coaches are hired, they usually get to at least pick one of the assistants. And instead, the assistant is given to him, and it's a guy who's also an advisor directly to the owner. Are other people on the staff and the players not going to maybe find that a little bit weird that there's going to be a guy on the bench as well respected as he is, great, knowledgeable person, I'm sure, had a tremendous career himself in Paul Coffey, but it just, the dynamic of it just seems different and seems weird. So I hope this doesn't blow up on them. I hope it works out. It's just really kind of different how things have kind of played out here, in my opinion, in the last number of days and some of the decisions that they've made here to move forward. I thought they really owed Jay Woodcroft a trade, but if Jackson was really that ambitious to get Knobloch in there, then it kind of makes sense why they went the route that they did. Now, of course, the Oilers and goaltending, we've seen it. There's been rumors since middle of last week that they were close to pulling off a blockbuster deal. A lot of people thought they were talking, well, it might not have been a blockbuster, but a big trade around goaltending. It did not have to do with Jack Campbell. Elliotte Friedman made that comment saying around Wednesday that there was a lot of talk. The Oilers were cooking on a big deal. Not Campbell going on waivers, but something else for goaltending. And a lot of people seem to think it's Montreal was the team that they might have been having some deep conversations with. We know that Darren Dreger put out the information saying Xavier Bourgault was a prospect in Edmonton that they were very, interested in keeping an eye on, so to speak. But John Buccigross of ESPN put out a tweet talking about the Bruins. And we know now the Bruins are probably pretty unlikely to do this, but when you start putting in a big name in the mix like a Leon Draisaitl, I'm sure it'd make any team kind of perk their ears and go, say what now? Leon? Right? So, we know they have the two-headed monster of Ullmark and Swayman, and they're both, again, doing amazing. Big part of the team's success, no doubt. Friedman's made mention that they're likely going to be trying to tackle an extension here for Jeremy Swayman. The longer they wait, the number's going to keep going up because he's playing well. Of course, they had the arbitration situation this past offseason. They want to avoid anything like that in the future. Get it done so they can start having some conversations. Of course, they're not really eligible to extend until January 1st, but they can have some preliminary talks. So when they get there, they have an idea where each side stands on what they want to do. At the end of the day, would they move Linus Ullmark for the right deal? You wouldn't think in a season like this, where they're off to an amazing start, and again, going to be in that conversation of cup contender, that they'd want to do that and break up that tandem. But basically how the conversation was, is if the Oilers called the Bruins saying, would you move one of your goaltenders, would they insist on them dangling Leon Draisaitl? We know that Nick McDavid and Draisaitl both have contracts that are not that far away really from getting done. Draisaitl will come first. Would they even entertain it? So the full deal here that Buccigross presented was Leon Draisaitl and Warren Foegele going to Boston in exchange for Ullmark, along with Jake DeBrusk, rookie centerman Matt Poitras, Fabian Lysell, the prospect, and a first rounder. Now, that's a lot. Now, Ullmark has tremendous value being a Vezina winning goaltender and off to another really hot start. I mean, Draisaitl's got tons of value too, right? So he's got a very favorable contract. Obviously can play center, can play wing, tremendous power play guy. Overall, one of the better players in the league. I don't know, right? You're getting Warren Foegele as well as a depth option. I'm not sure if this deal is even, but from a cap perspective, contract perspective, everything works that way. But, DeBrusk, we know there's no, really, if he's going to go anywhere, Edmonton does make a lot of sense for him. Ullmark obviously makes sense for them, but are the Oilers a better team with Ullmark but no Draisaitl? I don't know. It's so hard to imagine because they've always had Leon and Connor on that team for so long now, and it's been like the two-headed monster that, and the other thing is Connor McDavid going to be okay with this? I don't care what you say, even though he may not be calling the shots, you trade away his favorite player to play with and one of his best friends. Is he going to take that lightly? Yes, he wants to win. The team has to get better. In some ways, the team does get better, but in some ways they don't. This is a tough deal. And you got a young rookie centerman in Poitras who's likely not going to have the upside. He's a good player for sure, but is he going to have the upside of a Draisaitl? Probably not. But you combine that with Jake DeBrusk, and then Ullmark between the pipes and a first rounder. It's tempting to think about. And the next thing is, as the salary cap goes up and as these contracts come due, Leon's going to be able to command a ton of money. Connor's going to be able to get more money. Can they continue that from a cap perspective and make the team and surrounding pieces strong enough to be cup contenders? This deal will probably never happen. It's complicated. It involves some big names. I think both sides would have a lot of cold feet from pulling it off, as much as they might be very intrigued and excited at the same time. It just, you don't often see blockbusters like this anymore. The Huberdeau-Tkachuk trade was the biggest one we'll probably see in a while, but it's certainly an interesting concept for sure. Boston, of course, by losing Bergeron and Krejci, they get a legit, not only legit, but real top six center, one of the best in the league. They're still strong between the pipes because they still get Jeremy Swayman. They get a depth player in Warren Foegele. The Bruins give up Allmark, of course. He goes to stabilize the net between the pipes in Edmonton. You get a young centerman to play behind McDavid, a winger in DeBrusque who can be a top 6 winger for you, a first rounder which could turn into a really good player. It's difficult to say. And at this rate, I'd call Lysell a little bit of a project prospect, but still an interesting piece that could maybe turn out. Hard to say. So let me know your thoughts. Who says no to that trade? If Boston and Edmonton are having real conversations about this, which team do you think would accept or reject this deal? It's kind of interesting to think about, but like I said, highly unlikely we'll see it happen. Let me know your thoughts on that and everything else discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.